completely drinkable. Now I'm gonna show you myself, and I'm trying to poison you with this water. I'm gonna drink it myself. Yeah.
Okay, pagi ni kita nak pergi tengok tour, free tour di Sofia. Okay, ini hotel saya stay, Smart Hostel, Sofia Smart Hostel. Lawa kan? Comel kan? So saya nak jalan pergi ke tempat bertemuan dengan geng-geng free Sofia tour. Okay, pagi ni saya nak join group free tour Sofia dengan group kat belakang ni. Kita akan bertemu, kita orang semua berkumpul dekat sini dulu. Dalam pukul 11 lah, insyaAllah akan start. So, nanti kita share balik.
Most interesting sights of the city. And hopefully by the end of the tour, you're going to become experts in Sofia. Yeah. Now, we're not going to complete the tour here, but at the Alexander Nevsky Cathedral, you know, the big one with the golden domes. And now, it's not so far away from here. It's like 15 minutes of walking distance. And at the end of the tour, I'm going to stay there for a while. If you have any questions, need some recommendations, like, you know, we have these loud crowds passing through here. We decided to have the tour starting from here. It's a place where a lot of locals would meet to go on a walk on the Vino Boulevard, the main shopping and pedestrian street. Now, where we end the tour, there is like an alternative area with restaurants and so on. So I'm just going to point you the direction for that if you're looking for lunch or something.
Okay, kita mulakan free tour ni. Yes. Dia kata kat sini ada banyak lion, banyak simbol-simbol statue lion. Dia kata lion kat sini sangat penting. Namun begitu susah nak jumpa lion dekat negara ni, sebab katanya dulu dekat kawasan gunung-gunung ada banyak lion, singa. Tapi singa-singa tu dah dibunuh oleh kerajaan, orang-orang kerajaan Rom. Sedih juga kan?
Alright, so we made it to our first stop, and here I'd really like to introduce you to the long and complicated history of the city. So, first of all, do you have any idea how old it is?
1,000 years.
1,000 years. It's a few thousand years. How many?
2, 3,
2, 3,
5,
more.
5,000,
4,
Less than 10.
6,
8, 8,000.
8,000 years old. Yeah, it's 8,000 years old. Yeah, that's the place we're supposed to say, wow. Now, we're not really sure who these first people living here were. But archaeologists discovered some evidence that, you know, there were people living on this place in a civilized way, because they discovered some remains of houses, some streets and so on. Then we have a little bit more information about the next generation, the next culture inhabiting these territories. And these were the Thracians. Now, the Thracians were something like the northern neighbors of the ancient Greeks, but it was like their laid-back version, because Thracians used to have something like 200 holidays during the year. One of their main gods was Dionysius, the god of the wine. So, you know, they had a really interesting lifestyle. Now, I guess that is why they never managed to form a big centralized state. They were living divided on these small Thracian tribes, and that was it. So for this reason, without having their big centralized empire, in the 1st century AD, the Roman Empire started conquering these territories, and in the course of some 100 years, it all became a part of the Roman Empire. It was an actual province of the Roman Empire, and the Romans really liked this particular city because it's in a very central place here on the Balkans. Now the city was called Serdica, and that was named after the little Thracian tribe that was living here. They were called the Serdes, and we believe that this name Serdi has something to do with the Bulgarian word of Sreda, which is middle. It's in a really central place on the Balkans. And you know, this is the reason why the city was such an important spot in ancient times. It quickly became this administrative center. Romans started investing a lot, and we're going to see a lot of ruins from the Roman period. Like currently they say that we're standing over the ruins of the ancient Roman Forum. They're buried underneath the ground, and actually there's a project to uncover them, to have like these transparent sections so we can walk over these ruins. It might happen in the next 40-50 years, who knows. But yeah, we're gonna see a lot of things from Roman times, including a building from the 4th century that remains intact. So the city remained a Roman possession until the 9th century, and until then many things changed here, and changed in the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire split into two, so there was the Eastern and Western Roman Empire. Obviously that was the Eastern Roman Empire, as we call it nowadays, the Byzantine Empire. Around the 5th and 6th century, a lot of Slavic tribes started settling down on these territories. They flooded these territories, and then in 7th century AD, here came the ancient Bulgarians, our guys. Now we don't know where exactly they came from, what's the origins of these ancient Bulgarians. They were semi-nomadic tribes, so they were changing settlements every like 50 or 100 years. But then in the 7th century, a group of Bulgarians arrived here, and you know, once they saw these endless fields and beautiful mountains and everything, they said, that's it, we're gonna stop moving around, we're gonna build Bulgaria here. And well, you know, that was a pretty difficult task, as it was all part of the Byzantine Empire, and they had a really strong army, they had a flourishing culture. But then the Bulgarians managed to form a union with the Thracians and Slavic tribes. They convinced them that if they unite and they defeat the Byzantine Empire, they're going to build their own state with their own rules. So they joined forces, they defeated the Byzantine Empire, and that is how the first Bulgarian state was established in 681. Which makes us pretty proud, because that makes Bulgaria one of the oldest countries in Europe that actually never ever changed its name. How cool is that? Yeah. Now, the country started growing, expanding in terms of territory, having a much more important culture and so on. Things looked pretty promising. In the 9th century, the city became, back then Serdica, became part of Bulgaria. The same 9th century, we also accepted Christianity, we developed our own alphabet, and well, it looked like that's gonna become the Bulgarian Empire here. However, in the 11th century, all of a sudden, it was all conquered by the Byzantine Empire. They managed to get back their territories. Now, that didn't last for more than a century and a half. Then, after a revolution, the second Bulgarian state was established. We had our moments of glory. Again, things were looking promising. But then, at the end of the 14th century, the Ottoman Turks came here on the Balkan Peninsula and conquered everything. And this time they stayed here 500 years. So during these 500 years, there was no Bulgaria. But still, you know, Bulgarians have preserved their identity. And I guess the main reason for that was the religion. The religion was keeping them, you know, the Bulgarian culture together. So by the end of the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire was decaying. You know, there was the Industrial Revolution taking place in Western Europe, and it was kind of, everybody was expecting how the Ottoman Empire would retreat, you know, away from the Balkan Peninsula. So it was a time where nationalism was flourishing around Europe, and that affected the local Bulgarians. You know, they started dreaming about the liberation of the country, of the re-establishment of Bulgaria. Now, we made few small attempts for revolutions. Sadly, they failed in a brutal way. People were slaughtered by the Ottoman army, and then you know, that had a really big effect, because all around Europe this event echo that there's a Bulgarian nation that wants to be free and have its own state. So that gave a pretext, the Russian Empire, to declare war to the Ottoman Empire, and then they fought, and the result of that was, as we say, the liberation of Bulgaria. It took place in 1878. That's when Bulgaria was re-established. Now, back in the days, Bulgaria was much smaller, and we had this big dream about collecting all these territories inhabited with Bulgarians, which in our dreams was more or less like the entire Balkan Peninsula. So that led us to be a little bit more risky choosing sides during wars. And you know, at first the risk was paying well, the country started quickly growing, but then something went wrong and we started losing all the wars. We lost the Balkan Wars, we lost the First World War, we lost the Second World War, yay! As a result of that, we became a satellite of the Soviet Union. And you know, we're never a part of the USSR, but we're a very loyal satellite state. So what followed was these 45 years of socialism that ended the very next day the Berlin Wall came down. So as a result of that, you know, we started building democracy and capitalism. So as a result of that, from 2004, we're part of NATO, and from 2007, proudly part of the European Union. Yeah. So guys, that was briefly these 8,000 years of history. I really hope you remembered something as we quite just walk around. But please, if you have questions, don't hesitate, ask. Just want to show you the Catholic cathedral over there. Catholics are below 1% in Bulgaria, but you know, there's still a cathedral. I'm showing it to you because over there, when they were building this one, now there's another one from the 19th century, got destroyed during the era of the Second World War. In communist times, nobody touched anything over there. But in 2002, they started building this one, and it's a new generation of building. They had to dig a little bit deeper for its foundations, and they reached the Roman level of the city, and they discovered over there the western gate of the city. You know, starting from the 2nd century, the Romans would encircle their city centers with walls that would have 4 gates for the 4 different directions. So there's the western gate. Remember its place because later we're visiting the eastern gate, and you're gonna get an idea of how big the city used to be. So now we're gonna go down the stairs, we're gonna find a sunny spot, and I'm gonna tell you about the statue up there. Let's go. I really love this particular part of the tour because here you can visually see how old the city is. Because our city is divided on these different layers. Now we're just now on the contemporary level of the city. This here is the medieval level of the city, and over there is down there is the Roman level of the city. Now it happened like that because all the dust and dirt was remaining here, and it was making the level of the city grow slowly higher and higher. So already in medieval times, the level is so high that the people could have used the ruins from Roman times as foundations for their new buildings. And a similar thing happened right here with this building. It's a medieval church. It dates either from the 14th or the 15th century. It's not quite sure, but one thing is sure, the country was already conquered by the Ottoman Empire, and there was like no Christian state that would fund the establishment of new Christian temples. So on that spot here, there was a market, and the richest people in this market were the Bulgarian saddlers. They were making saddles for the horses. So they decided to collect some money and build their own church, as there was no one else to do it. So they had all the funds ready, and they were just about to start building when they encountered a major problem. Now it turned out that in Ottoman times, in order to get the legal permission to build a church, you had to wait a lot. Like the records of communities waiting for 150 years to get a permission to build our church. And these merchants, they wanted to see it in their lifetime, so they started troubleshooting with one of the best solutions here in the Balkans, which is corruption. Yeah. So they started bribing the authorities, and well, they say that pretty soon after that they managed to get their permission, but they encountered another big problem. They say that they lost, they spent all their money bribing the authorities, and now there's no money for materials. So the legend goes that they started connecting stones and bricks from abandoned buildings. And if you take a closer look at the materials used, you can see some pretty suspicious Roman bricks in this construction. So it might have been true, but anyways, they managed to complete it, and they called the church Saint Petka. that was their patron saint. Now, the roof, together with the building, dates from the 4th century, and there are debates whether it was a bath or it was a temple. Both of the things were loved by the Romans. If you ask me, though, it was rather a bath, because they discovered some canals that were connecting the main building with a hot spring that we saw. So the thing is that they think they were taking hot water from the hot spring inside the main building, where they were controlling its temperature, either heating it up or cooling it down. Alright, now I have a question for you again here. Do you have any idea how old these walls are? 2,000 years? Yeah, actually 10 years old. Well, the thing is, they were digging here the metro in the city center, and it wasn't such a big surprise that they were going to discover a lot of things from Roman times, because basically the contemporary city is in the same place as the place of the Roman city. So they found these ruins, and it was decided that we were going to make our little version of Pompeii here, with all these ruins and covered. Now, still though, they didn't really calculate the fact that the reason for having them preserved is that they were still underneath the ground. They were protected by temperature changes and rains and everything. They uncovered them, and within 2 years they started falling apart because they were exposed. And that's when it was decided to conserve them. So they created this top layer, and left us a line to distinguish the real things below from this protective layer. Eventually placed some more cement. Now, if you ask me, they went a little bit too far with putting these brand new tiles that we imported from Turkey, because they would give us the best price. But the idea is to preserve everything and to simply walk around, feel like we're in Roman times. Now, this part of the city was where the richest Romans were living. Or normally, in a city like this one that would have had a fortress, the ordinary population of the city would have lived outside of these walls. The inner part of the city was dedicated to the administration, to the temple, the markets, and to the houses of the richest people, and they were living here. So the mosque here is the only functioning one in the city, and it is called Banya Başı, which means something like the mosque of the Turkish bath. Right next to it was the Ottoman hammam. So it was kind of a bathing complex. You'd go and wash yourself, then go for a prayer. So nowadays it is still functioning. You see, there's the minaret and there's some loudspeakers up there. From there you might hear the muezzin calling for a prayer. Normally in the Muslim world there are 5 calls a day. Here there are only 3, because there are a lot of residents living in the area, and they started complaining that the first call at 5 a.m. is way too early. They said, okay, we're skipping the first and the last call, but still it is operating. Yeah. The medieval capital of the country was Vino. That's in central Bulgaria, on a place really suitable for a capital, like in the middle of the mountains. There's a river passing through. It's naturally defended by nature. But then the local authorities decided that this will become the new capital, because it was right in the middle of all these territories that we wanted to conquer. So it was rather like a political decision, but on the other side, the city wasn't infrastructurally ready to become a capital. There were like no sewers, no running water, no pavements. At the same time, they chose it to become a capital, and it quickly started attracting people to come here and build their house. Very often though, they weren't making any bathrooms in these houses, and in the beginning of the 20th century, that was recognized as as a big problem. So the authorities decided to start promoting hygiene as an important virtue for Bulgarians and voted to build the public bath.
Oh.
And the public bath immediately became a huge success. People were spending their entire weekends inside, and you wouldn't go inside and bathe all day long. You'd be also chit-chatting and gossiping. It was a big social place. So that's why we were joking. It's the Facebook of the 20th century. So sadly, the bath closed its doors in the 80s. That was the end of the local socialism, and the country was experiencing various financial problems. So the easiest thing was to simply abandon the building. It started falling apart, and it was rather a depressing sight until 5-6 years ago. They renovated the building, and it's reopened its doors as the History Museum of Sofia. Really love the museum. It's pretty interesting, but most of the locals don't. They even hate it because they want their bath back. And it makes sense. The building was especially chosen to be established here because it's a place where there's a hot spring coming from the ground, and it used to power, this hot spring used to power this building with waters that have temperature of 37 degrees Celsius. So it would have been perfect in this weather. So that is why locals keep on protesting. They want the bath back, and the authorities are saying we will turn it into a bath next year. So. Once they shut down the bath, they created a small complex with fountains, similar to this one. It's like on the other side of the building, where people are going with their empty bottles and they're filling them with this water, because it's basically the same water you'd find in the supermarket, but it's free. They say it's really good for the liver, so it's really completely drinkable. Now I'm gonna show you myself that I'm not trying to poison you with this water. I'm gonna drink it myself. Lenin Square. That was the base of the Communist Party back in the days. Now once the communists took the power and they were certain that there's no one to replace them, in the 50s they wiped down everything here that was in the city center, and that's the most charming part of the city. It was full of these luxurious man-scale buildings with expensive shops on the first floor, with various ornaments and stuff. It was all damaged during the era of the Second World War, and simply in the 50s it was completely demolished to open some space for this gigantic complex in the neoclassical Stalinist style, favorite style of the communists. Now the first building they completed was this one over there, and that was the headquarters of the Communist Party. It used to have a big red star on top with various sickles and hammers. Nowadays it says Narodno Sobranie, which means National Assembly, and it's not really the National Assembly. We're gonna see it at the end of the tour. This building is more like administration nowadays of the of the parliament. The deputies are gathering in commissions over there, fine-tuning details and so on. The next building in the square that was completed was this one over there. On the left side, that was the Ministry of Electrification. They had to create a good power grid to start industrializing the country according to the plans of the communist authorities. So nowadays that is the presidency, and now there's something pretty curious. The presidency is connected to a hotel with a casino on the first floor.
Ooh.
Casino, presidency. See, that is why we say Bulgaria is the country of unlimited opportunities. And now the last building in the square we completed was this one over here. On that side, that was the Ministry of Heavy Industry. Currently that's the Council of Ministers. And this side is called ZUM. And ZUM stands for Central Department Store. It was something like the communist mall during this period. It was a place where you were able to find everything available on the communist market, including cars. And buying a car was a really interesting procedure back in the days, because cars were very, very expensive. You'd be saving like at least 4 or 5 years to buy a car. Then, okay, you've saved the money. You go over there, you pick your Lada, and they'll tell you, you pay for it, then they'll tell you, congratulations, comrade, now your name is on our waiting list. And the waiting for a car that you bought was between 8 to 12 years.
Ooh.
So, these are some of things in white and red. Now we call them martenica. And in the beginning of every March, on every 1st of March, we'd start exchanging these things, mostly in the form of a bracelet. So you're supposed to tie it to the wrists of your friends and family and then wear it until spring is here. And we're judging that the spring is here by seeing storks coming back from the south. You know, the storks migrate for the winter, and when storks start appearing on the territories of Bulgaria, that would be a certain sign that the spring is near. So that is when you're supposed to take off your martenica and put it on a blossoming branch of a tree. So, you know, the reason for having so many martenicas in there, like previous years, most of them on the branches, is that this is the first tree that starts blooming in spring. It has this really nice white color, and that's because it's a plum. And plums are some really respected fruits here in Bulgaria, because out of plum we make rakia. Yeah, the traditional alcoholic drink here. Now, I was recently told that it's part of the dignity of every Bulgarian to be producing his own rakia at home. And I guess part of the dignity is to make it as strong as you can endure, because once I tried rakia, which was 70% alcohol. So I guess that's how we go through the normal cold winters in the country. You drink your small sips of rakia, strong rakia, and with each and every next sip, problems start fading away, you start floating. Yeah. They say it's also a natural remedy for coronavirus. That would probably justify why only 30% of the local population is vaccinated. The rest of people simply rely on the on the traditional medicine of the rakia. So if he starts, here's the yellow building, which is the former royal palace. Now, I'm sure you've seen more spectacular royal palaces. This building wasn't really designed to be a royal palace. It dates from the year of 1850, and that was the Ottoman konak. That was a multiple-purpose building that was combining local administration, the police department. Right, I don't know whether you noticed, but we had to climb a little bit to reach this point, and it's mostly visible if you take a look at this direction. Things are going down, it's like a slope, and that is actually the highest point in the nowadays city center, and that was the highest point in the city back in the days. So that is why in the 6th century it was decided that the Romans are going to put this really big church right here. It was the program of the Roman Emperor Justinian to build churches all around the Roman Empire with the same name, Hagia Sophia. He was the one that built the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, which is now a mosque in Istanbul. And in the case of the city, they put the church a little bit in the outskirts of the city. But you know, it quickly, they did it to turn it into a symbol of the city. So when people were approaching it from a very long distance, that would be the first thing that they'll see from the city. This church, and they'll say, "Oh, look, there is Sofia." That we're speaking about the church, Saint Sofia, but meaning the city of Serdica, which they were headed to. So with time, the fame of the city started decaying, but still the church remained something very, very important. And eventually it gave its name to the city. That's how it happened. So already when Ottomans came here, already everybody was referring to the city not anymore as to Serdica, but as Sofia. So once they heard that thing, they officially put in their lists like that. Now, the church was again used by Bulgarians and Greeks. It was converted by the Ottomans into a mosque. Then after the liberation, for a while, it was used by the fire brigade. They established a tower on top, and from this tower they were getting a really nice view of the entire city until the 20s, when new buildings started emerging in the area. Like, for instance, the yellow one here is the first apartment building in the city, and it really blocked their view. So that is when it was turned back into a church, and it's a very, very impressive one. It's a functioning church. This here is called the Holy Synod. That is something like the parliament of the church. Inside, our patriarch is residing with the rest of the priests. And you know, the Bulgarian Orthodox Church is independent, so we have our own patriarch. That is like the local pope. That is the Sofia University, most prestigious university in the country, and the white one over there used to be a printing factory, state printing factory.
Sekarang free tour dah habis. Jadi saya pun ronda-ronda lah dekat tepi-tepi tu je. Ada ramai orang jual cenderamata dan juga lukisan dekat sini. Ada lukisan pemandangan, ada lukisan yang berasaskan ajaran Kristian Ortodoks dekat sini. Kat sini pula saya jumpa diorang ni jual barang-barang terpakai. Barang-barang diorang sendiri, macam ada headphone, ada beg tarik, ada screen notebook, ada baju, barang permainan kanak-kanak dan macam-macam lagi. Ramai juga yang datang tengok-tengok apa yang diorang jual ni. Ni dia punya tandas awam dia. Ada mesin kat situ. Kita kena masukkan satu left dan dia automatik terbuka. Menarik. Mungkin saya perlukan. Okey, kalau tempat lintas jalan yang ada lampu isyarat macam ni, kita kena ikut lampu isyarat, jangan langgar. Tapi kalau zebra crossing, yang tu kita punya. Mana-mana kenderaan pun kena berhenti. Tapi yang ini sebab ada traffic light, so kita kena ikut traffic light. Jangan buat perangai macam orang Malaysia, langgar traffic light. Sana dah hijau, sini belum hijau. Kenapa sana dah hijau, sini belum hijau? Okey, sekarang boleh cross. Dah hijau. Kita lalu balik depan Palace of Justice tadi tu, tempat saya berkumpul tadi. Okey, kat sini cuba tengok dekat tepi tu. Ada banyak skuter elektrik. Diorang ni memang buat sewa tau. Jadi ramai juga penduduk tempatan gunakan skuter elektrik ni untuk bergerak ke mana-mana. Dia memang boleh digunakan dekat jalan raya macam kereta, macam kenderaan lain. Depan tu ada satu katedral cantik, Saint Alexander Nevsky Cathedral. Saya nak menuju ke sana tu. Saya kena minta jalan lah. Alamak, tu ada zebra. Pergi mentas dekat zebra lah. Silap lah. Ni zebra crossing. kita lintas dekat zebra crossing.
St. Alexander Nevsky Cathedral merupakan salah satu landmark utama di Sofia, Bulgaria. Ia merupakan antara 50 gereja Kristian yang terbesar seluruh dunia. Projek groundbreaking atau pecah tanahnya bermula pada tahun 1882 dan kemudian ia siap dibina pada tahun 1912.
Okey. Kita ronda lagi. Ada apa kat sini? Ni semua kedai souvenir. Saya tengok kedai souvenir dia banyak jual barang-barang berasaskan rose, krim, pewangi, minyak rose, dan juga tadi ada juga tablecloth. Okey, kita nak melintas jalan. Ada tablecloth juga kat sini. Selain daripada fridge magnet, apa semua tu memang ada lah. Fridge magnet, bag, backpack, kitchen tu memang ada. Belum lagi lah, ni saya baru je sampai kan. So saya just tengok dululah. Kemudian lah baru cari, baru beli. Ni ronda-ronda cari kedai jual SIM card. Susah juga kan kalau tak ada SIM card, sebab nak tengok Google Map tak ada internet. Oh, tempat ni memang happening. Saya main jalan je ni, saya bukan tahu saya kat mana sebenarnya. Nanti kalau nak balik kan baru cari jalan nak balik. Ni ronda je dulu. Ini tempat dia orang makan mewah-mewah sini. Memang betul-betul kalau Malaysia ni memang ke bintang lah ni rasanya. Tengok dia punya kafe mahal-mahal semua kat sini. Mana kedai SIM card ni? Jual SIM card. Kedai souvenir banyak sini. Money changer pun rupanya banyak. Kayaknya selepas nikah tadi saya dah jumpa 3 money changer kawasan ni. Dia memang tempat orang kaya ni. Telenor tu bukan SIM card ke? Kita tengok. Oh, tutup lah. Hari ni Ahad dia tutup. Oh lah, tutup lah.
Sebenarnya pada hari pertama saya ada 2 perkara saya nak buat. Pertama, saya kena tukar duit, kena cari penguruk wang nak tukar duit euro ke duit leva. Yang tu saya dah jumpa dekat satu kedai nama dia Mika. Dan yang kedua ialah saya nak cari SIM card. Itu yang saya mau terpusing-pusing meronda-ronda nak cari SIM card. Saya nak beli local SIM card tapi tak jumpa. Okey, kalau anda perasan, biasanya kat tempat-tempat lain sebenarnya orangnya tak ramai. Tapi dekat sini, sebab ini adalah pusat komersial yang sangat sibuk dan aktif, di sinilah saya nampak ramai orang makan-makan, lepak, beli-beli barang apa semua. Itu saja untuk cerita hari pertama saya di Sofia, Bulgaria. Boleh like, komen dan juga jangan lupa subscribe channel YouTube saya ni supaya nanti lepas ni korang boleh tengok lagi video-video yang seterusnya.